All right. So to continue the discussion on the NFL, um, I don't know what the competition committee. So this happens like every year, where the competition committee, it's a bunch of executives from all 32 teams, and propose a bunch of new rules. You need 24 out of 32 votes to make a new rule. There's a bunch of interesting proposals this year. This is just for reference. This is where stuff like moving the extra point back, where that got approved, is in a meeting like this. Any sort of new rule change comes through this meeting, and there's three interesting ones, I think. Um, I think the big one we can talk about. I think this will be the big one because it's probably has the highest chance of going through. Is this change to the kickoff? And the kickoff has always been, I find, a very interesting and flawed play. It's very anticlimactic at this point because of all the player safety stuff that's happening, trying to reduce collisions on kickoffs. More often than not, they turn into touchbacks. They've been incentivizing touchbacks and, well, making the game safer, which is awesome. It has made kickoffs a whole lot less interesting. So the NFL is considering the XFL model in terms of kickoffs, which would change it because how this would work is instead of an NFL kickoff where you've got one team on one side of the field, another team on the other side of the field, ball is kicked. As soon as the ball is kicked, they both run at each other. You're running the entire field at each other. That's where the injuries happen. In the XFL, you've got the kicker on one side, and then you've got both teams lined up where the ball will be. The Both teams are not allowed to move until the ball is caught. And yeah, that's a great example of it. So they're lined up 5 yards away from each other. This reduces the chances, like the high speed collisions, but you still have the ability to return a kickoff. And it leads to a lot more returns too. I know they found in the XFL, I don't know if the USFL has the same kind of thing or something similar, but it was found to reduce injuries and also lead to more returns, which is kind of like the perfect happy medium. It's something that I think will probably get passed. I think it's on probably like 50-50. But I'd be super excited to see it. I don't know about you, Simon.
Yeah, no, I actually think it's a good idea too. I feel like it'd be. I guess I almost don't know what the other argument against it would be. I guess, just in the sense that it's kind of just a no-brainer because like you pointed out, you said it best on that one where it's just like more returns, less injuries. What else are you looking for, right? I almost think the only reason they hadn't done it previously is just tradition, which I think holds back a lot of leagues in a sense where things stick around when they probably shouldn't just because they've been doing it forever, which shouldn't be a very good excuse except for fighting. Fighting is awesome. But in every other sense, it applies. Usually.
Yeah.
Like it's.
Yeah.
I mean, this is very similar. I mean, we talked about with the oh god, I'm forgetting the CEBL in the the Canadian Basketball League. We talked about the yep, exactly. Like we talked about the way that they were ending their games with like a targeted score and how that made the game more entertaining. I think this is just another one of those things where I don't know why they wouldn't change to it. It's the same thing. It's the same conversation we had back when we had that conversation, right? It's just at what point is tradition not worth keeping when it's both less safe and less entertaining? Like,
yeah,
I don't know.
Again, because the kickoff is literally the most anticlimactic play in sports because there's so much anticipation. It's how you start a game. It's right after a score. The crowd is hyped, and then the ball goes into the back of the end zone, and nobody cares. In this instance, at least you get the chance of a return.
It got so bad, and I guess they've probably been doing this forever at this point, that I think I've seen players run out the back of the end zone as a tradition. Like the defensive team or the kicking team or whatever, run out the back of the opposite end zone as a tradition because that's been built with how many teams just don't do anything with the kickoff, which is kind of hilarious.
With the kickoff moving up to the 25 with the touchback, it's 20.
Yeah, no, I do agree with you. I think it is the smarter move. I think it'll kind of... I mean, one thing that the NFL's kind of been missing in the last 10 years is we don't really have any elite returners anymore. if you think about it. Like, that used to be a thing when you used to watch football back in the day, where, like, you'd see, like, just absolutely incredible returns from, like, all of a sudden I'm forgetting names I absolutely shouldn't. Like, Jackson for the
Dante
Eagles.
Hall.
Like, yeah, exactly. Like,
not Jackson,
yeah, like, you can...
Jacoby Jones in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, exactly, right? Where it's one of those things where it would be very cool to start to see that again, because it was almost the death of the kick returner. Like, your job just got destroyed because if you were good at it, you didn't get to do your job.
Yeah. And I mean, I do think this is like a couple things. I think one, I get a lot of my opinions from this from a guy, speaking of people I've talked about multiple times on the podcast, another John Boyce shout out here. There's a video called Kickoffs Are Stupid and Bad. It's been a while. It's been a while. So it's because he takes like a year to make new things. Whenever he makes something new, I'm sure I'll shout it out again. But he has a video called Kickoffs Are Stupid and Bad. It's like 10 minutes long. Watch it on YouTube if you haven't seen it. But basically, his point is that essentially that the kickoff has been dead for a long time, where even when kickoff returns go for touchdowns, they're not very interesting, and most of the times they don't do that. And it's actually like punt returns are what's interesting. He compared he charted all of the return paths of both kick return touchdowns and punt return touchdowns. And kick return touchdowns, and normally, I see if I can like draw this out with my hand. And normally it kind of looks like, which way am I going? Am I going this way? No, I'm going this way. Yeah, there we go. Kick return touchdowns, it normally looks like this, where you just kind of like go around the defense and then boom, straight line in. Where it's just like you make one move, you find one hole in the blocking, and then you're in for a touchdown. Punt returns are where you see more of the chaos happening in terms of like, if you look up any like the famous Dante Hall return where he just like zigs back around on himself like 5 times and loops back into his own end zone and then finds a hole, like that's what you see in punt returns. Because there's a lot more even footing in terms of like people are still like fighting for their blocks as they go down the field. And this rule makes kickoffs more like punt returns. And I think that's awesome. Yeah. And I think you could see if that video's thesis is essentially right, which I think it is, you will see more interesting returns than you ever saw even in kickoffs before all the safety rules made them kind of obsolete.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't disagree with any of that. That's the funny thing about this one, this rule change specifically, because like I said, I don't know what the argument against it is other than tradition. Like, seriously, can you, like, even just try and play devil's advocate. Without saying tradition, what is the one reason you keep it?
If I'm to play devil's advocate, I honestly, I think you could knock it for a couple things, which I don't agree with. But I think one is that it's kind of gimmicky.
Not the new changes. I just mean like never mind. Actually, no, that makes more sense.
Like the XFL stuff. It is kind of gimmicky, and I do think it will take an adjustment period to get used to, because it does, to the football fan who is used to seeing people run out at the kickoffs, as someone who started watching the XFL, it was kind of awkward to see the ball hang up in the air, and then everybody's just standing there, and nobody's moving.
Where is it?
And it's like, okay,
it's like when you throw a tennis ball for your dog, and he's trying to figure out where it's going to land.
Yeah, pretty much. That is the thing where it's like, that part is kind of, it kind of looks awkward, but like, who cares? This is why I think it will, because I do think tradition is the main argument. I think you're right with that, and I think that's why people will vote against it, because like, it's the kickoff, it's been part of football since time immemorial. Like, yeah, like, okay, but it's not good anymore. So I think people, because again, you need more than 8 people vote against it and it's dead. I think some people will vote against it just for tradition, but it is like the reason I'm talking about it first, or I brought it up first, is because I do think it has a pretty high likelihood of passing. Because other than tradition, like you said, I don't think there's any good argument against it.
No.
I don't know if you want to move into the other kicking rule. This is the one that I'm a lot more passionate about. The onside kick rule. So this makes me more, I don't have any like feelings towards the Eagles really, but this makes me like the Eagles as a franchise a lot more, because I think for 3 years they've brought up this rule proposal. It's been shot down every time. It's probably going to get shot down again because the NFL hates fun. But essentially, what it is you replace the onside kick. Um, it's an onside kick alternative, is how they're framing it. So if you're down in the fourth quarter, and you're down in the fourth quarter, where you would normally want to do an onside kick, with this new rule change, what you could potentially do is go for a 4th and 20, I believe, on your own 20. And essentially, the gambit is this, right? Is you can pick up the 4th and 20, and then you get the first down and you keep going. And it's a much smarter way to determine whether a football game keeps going than an onside kick, because instead of just kicking a ball in the air and having the very anticlimactic play of someone catching it and just being down, you decide a football game on a football play. It still has very low odds. It still is very difficult to climb back into a game from down multiple scores, especially on a 4th and 20.
What?
At least you're deciding a football game with a football play.
And I know you're not going to have the answer to this one, I don't think. But what do you think the odds are of a 4th and 20 compared to the odds of someone making an onside kick? Do you think they'd be similar?
I think it'll be easier to do this, because especially with, like, again, new player safety rules. I don't think that's a bad thing, though, because the onside kick, another thing we've seen in the onside kick is that the rate of which they've been recovered recently has gone down significantly.
Yeah. Well, that's because, and there's also been
rules
rules
like 10%, and now it's like 4.
But they also made rules against certain things on onside kicks. It's the same thing as kickoffs.
Yeah, that's
where they made it a lot harder. Yeah. Which I think my argument, if you want to do something like a 4th and 20 rule, you have to move them back until it's the same odds. Like it would have to be like a 4th and 30 or whatever, where it becomes the same odds as kicking an onside kick now, if you're going to make a rule change like that. Or even just trying to get it back to where it was. Like, if 10%, how far back would you have to move them for a 10% chance?
So, this is interesting. So, I do have actually the stats here.
Oh, okay.
Where last year, according to Sports Radar, last year, only 5% of onside kicks in the fourth quarter were recovered. That's down from 18.8% in 2017. I've seen a 15% drop. That is what I would like. I think 4th and 20 is probably even less than a 20% chance, if I'm being quite honest. I would even be. I wouldn't be opposed to a 4th and 15. I wouldn't be opposed to a 4th and 15.
I'd say 4th and 20.
Or even a 4th.
Like, hearing those odds, I feel like I'm switching sides of the fence. I'd go 4th and 20.
Yep.
I actually like that number in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah. 4th and 20, like, I think it'll be interesting. I do think if it was me personally and I was being picky, I would like 4th and 15, because I do think that's a lot more manageable, a lot more, because you do want people to at least have a chance, right? Like,
sure.
4th and 20 is still a very long shot. I still like it a hell of a lot better than an onside kick, but it is still a long shot. 4th and 15 does feel manageable while not being a gimme, still being very difficult to get back into the game. The other thing that is important to note about the Eagles' proposal is that they don't allow people to abuse it, where it can only be used in very specific situations, and it can only be used up to 2 times per game. So if a team is down like 3 scores, they can't come back into the game and just never give the ball back to the other team, because you can only do it 2 times. You can only do it in the fourth quarter.
How long do you think it would take, if they don't have a rule like that, for a team to just get really good at converting like 4th and 15s, 4th and 20s to the point where they're risking it in like the second quarter?
I don't think so. No, because
that'd be so funny.
Is that it would be. But it is also from your own 20.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't that's the other thing that's important about this is teams aren't going to just pull it out willy-nilly, because this Eagles proposal specifically limits them from doing that, but also because nobody's going to go for a 4th and 20 from your own 20 in any other situation other than a desperation situation, right?
Yeah.
The only time you would do it.
But it'd be funny. It would be something I would do a lot in Madden.
Yeah. That's something we should talk. Like, how does this affect Madden?
Yeah, how does this affect your Madden franchise?
That would
you heard it here first, folks. You better get some good receivers for Mutt next year. You're gonna want some jump ball guys. Better hope Randy Moss is the meta again. I don't play Mutt.
Yeah, neither do I. It's not.
Yeah, no,
not a good one.
Yeah, no, it's funny thing, I'm poor, so I'm not very good at Mutt. My wallet's not very good at Mutt.
Yeah. I played Madden Mobile back in 2017, and I'm never going back to that kind of game.
Yeah, no, I played like my team in NBA for a bit. That one was slightly less pay to win because you could still get good players. Like you'd get like 97. I had a whole team of like 97s, which is pretty good. And then you'd play a game against like a team with like a prime, or not even like it'd be called like a Galaxy Opal Shaq, and he'd hit threes with them from like 15 feet behind the 3-point line, and I'm like, all right, you know what? I don't like you, Gabe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my team experience. I have not gone back since. But yeah, how will this affect my Madden franchise?
I just never wanted to pay for that. Yeah. If we want to get into like the last rule change, this one we can hit a little bit quicker. Is the hip drop tackle stuff. The proposal was that any hip drop tackles, which I don't know if like, kind of hard to explain without having the visual of it, as we were finding out before the podcast. But it's basically like, if you look up, I believe, like Mark Andrews got injured by this last year. There's a bunch of other players who got injured by this last year. That's why it's such a big talking point. It's essentially where you grab a player and then you bring yourself inside and you essentially like use your body weight to bring them down.
You like swing underneath, basically.
Yeah, and the risk is of like leg injuries to that, right? Like
yes.
I don't remember what Mark Andrews' injury specifically was, but obviously when you're doing that, you're putting the player who has the ball, their legs in a lot of risk. I'm just pulling a lot of these like stats I'm pulling from the Score article here that I have in front of me, where they quote a league executive, Jeff Miller, says the hip drop tackle increases risk of injury by 25 times the rate of a standard tackle.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. The committee views these tackles as similar to horse collar tackles that were banned in 2005. Which an interesting comparison.
I was gonna say, I get it on the injury standpoint, but I guess when you're tackling a guy like Mark Andrews, in the example we just showed, Luke Wilson, he ain't a small guy, but like let's say you're a cornerback, right? Like other than just like cut for the legs, like what do you do? Like sure, like if you're hanging on, are you just supposed to hang on for dear life now, or are you supposed to? Because in my head, when I'm thinking, if I'm grabbing Mark Andrews from behind here, right, where like I'm trying to pull him down, I'm gonna try and pull him backwards the exact same way that Luke Wilson did it. That just makes sense. Like that's just logical. When somebody's moving forward and you're trying to stop their momentum, if you try and do this, and while you're midair, guess what's gonna happen? You're gonna swing. So I honestly could see a lot of penalties coming from this because I totally could see this being a habit that a lot of NFL players just can't break, because it's just like when you're on the field and you're not thinking about it and your brain just goes, I need to get that guy onto the dirt. It's not the same as a horse collar tackle where you're just not grabbing the back of his jersey. This is a completely different thing where I need to remember not to swing. I need to remember not to move my body after I make that loop, right? And I think I don't even know what would replace it, I guess, is kind of my argument against it. I understand the injury thing completely, but it's just I feel like a lot of those like bigger tight end type runners will be able to break a lot more tackles without a rule like this. Or a tackle like this.
Yeah. And I can get that too. The counter argument to that obviously is like people still make tackles while not doing this.
Sure.
It's not like this is what every tackle is. My concern, I think, would be in terms of where would it fall on the scale of horse collar tackle to roughing the passer, where horse collar tackle is something, it's a rule that was implemented, and it's like nobody has any issue with that because it's so
Yeah.
obvious to tell when the horse collar gets yanked.
And
There's
that
never really any controversy. Whereas roughing the passer is something that's so subjective and bullshit that you get like it ruins games a lot of times because the ref is too soft in terms of like this guy brushed up against a quarterback. Are we going to see like how cut and dry?
I think we will.
It is a hip drop tackle.
I think this will be a defensive version of that, actually. And that's what I was trying to say as well.
Well,
where
it's
it's
still
like,
against the defense, right? Like,
oh,
it's just
true.
another rule that goes against the defense.
Oh, true. Never mind. You're totally right. Oh, wow, that's not good. I mean, yeah, no, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. Because, I mean, just like I said, just think about it logically. What would you do? If you've been doing this, it's not like a horse collar where, like, you just have to remember not to do this. As long as you don't do this, you're not horse collaring him. Right? Like, it's pretty clear cut on that one. When you are mid tackle and the adrenaline's going, I'm just trying to get you to the ground. Like, I'm gonna do whatever it takes to get you to the ground. I mean, you're gonna have to be very well disciplined to not think to yourself, I could take him down if I just pull myself in. Because I think it's gonna depend on what the full definition ends up being. Because is it actually using a swing motion to try and like pull them down backwards, or is it pulling yourself closer to the runner? Because if people start getting called just for like basically doing this, then we're gonna have a huge issue, I think.
Yeah, and that's what I hope doesn't happen. I hope it's pretty strict in terms of like it has to be pretty blatant for them to call it. I think I'm in the camp where it's like I would support the penalty because again, it was a huge thing, especially last year, where players were getting like seriously hurt from this, and like again, there's a reason they said it's 25 times more dangerous than a normal tackle because it is. Like that's kind of the tricky part about it. But I do think they have to be very careful in how they implement it. This can't just be something that they just say hip drop tackles are banned. That's it. I think they have to provide a very clear set of outlines in terms of what that looks like, because that's what the NFL has been very poor at in terms of roughing the passer. Because there's a very wide range of things that can be roughing the passer. Like you pointed out, I think they need to just be very specific in how they define that. Because again, like you said, if it's just this motion, like that's going
to happen 1,000 times a game. Like,
yeah.
I think you need to start defining as well what is just a standard tackle. Like, did they ever define that when they were talking about this? Like, what is considered a standard tackle? Because
that's a good question. I don't know if they. I'm sure they have a definition of
God, of course, of course, the biggest issue in football would be not defining all this garbage. But it's, I don't know. You'd have to figure out all of this stuff that I have a really hard time seeing exactly how they do it well. So if they do end up doing it, I'm really curious how they're gonna go about it. I guess that was a roundabout way of saying that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
I think. Do you want the official NFL definition of tackling? Just like very quickly Googling the NFL rulebook. They define tackling as an attempt by a defensive player to hold a runner to a halt, his advance, or to bring him to the ground. Oh boy, that's
very not an answer. That's so. Huh. So, in that sense, you would think that with this new rule, if the tackler does try and pull himself closer to the runner, that would be a penalty. If you just think about it like that.
Yeah, I think
is a
really
scary thought.
Yeah, I think if you are in the future watching this video and they have passed this, I don't know when the competition committee is meeting. I think later this month, so probably at the end of March. If they've approved this by then, and you are a future person watching this, I would go and look at the lingo specifically in terms of what they say and how they define it, because I think that will determine how we see it being implemented. Again, I'm not against it, but I'm very cautious in terms of how they would implement it.
I just think it's interesting in the sense that I don't know how they do it at all. I guess. So I'm almost. Yeah. I hope they do it solely because of the fact that I'm curious. Although I do think that it would become controversial very quick. Because think about it like this.
Yeah.
Wait until a penalty. Like, imagine this happens on like a goal line, 4th and 1 inch. This happens.
Yeah.
And that wins the game for an offensive team. Imagine the shitstorm. Like, especially if a player doesn't get injured from it. Like, it's just, it would blow up the world, basically. And so in that sense, I don't know. I look at it right now and I don't know how they do it because it's too similar to a regular tackle. It's like I keep making that point, but I think it's a really good one to make in just the sense that comparing it to the horse collar just doesn't feel right, because when you see a horse collar now, like, it's the type of thing where, like, you see the grab on the back of the collar, bang, and immediately go, ooh, he did that, like, instantly, because it's obvious. Like, you can see it from a mile away on the camera. This is not the same thing. Like, this is very clearly something that you could totally just mistake for a regular tackle. And like you said, I think it's going to come down to how they define it. Because if they continue to make mistakes and just the same mistake they've made with a ton of different things where it's just they're not defining something, we're going to run into some issues. A lot of issues.
Yeah. It'll be very interesting to see how it all plays out. Like, I'll be looking forward to this is what the off season gets us into. I'll be looking forward to the competition committee vote.
Oh. Guys, count the days. Guys, 8 days till the competition vote or whatever. Go nuts. I got my jersey ready. It's my referee jersey.
Oh yeah.
Dressing in stripes.